Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to the uncomfortable conversation we need to have. My name is Beverly Perryman, Spice Island Queen. I'm a certified sexologist, and tonight I am hosting Toxic Masculinity. So our guest is a very special bunch tonight that you're going to get information, going to brighten your horizon. You're going to learn things. While everything is not for everyone, we just ask that you be open-minded. You're now going to take it over my co-host, Carmen Coward. And after that, she's going to do a little meditation. And then we're going to ask our guests, Ben Miller, Michael, and Steve Bob, to introduce themselves. Take it away, Carmen.
So I'm Carmen. My friends call me Carms, and I am known as Spice Island Babe. I am a special education teacher. I have a bachelor's degree, a bachelor's of science in psychology. I have a master's degree in special education and general education. I teach sixth grade ELA, science, and social studies.
Okay, so now we're gonna get a little 2-minute meditation.
Excellent. I'll share my screen 1 second.
Hi, Sydney.
Hi.
Hey.
And please don't be afraid to breathe and clear your mind. And come to us with peace and grace. Thank you.
Okay, now we're gonna hear our guest introduction, starting with, I'm gonna call you in the order that I see you, okay? Ben Miller, welcome.
Thank you, Beverly. Nice to meet you, everyone, and welcome to everyone listening in and watching the recording tonight. Thank you. This event came up as a kind of offshoot of the Intimacy Ignited Summit a month or two ago, and just developed organically from talking with Beverly and kind of complaining about toxic masculinity. And she came up with this awesome idea and curated awesome guests. And the context behind that is that I've been running a magazine called Sapiosexual for a couple years. So that's how I got involved in this space in the first place with the summit. And yeah, I've just been working on social entrepreneurship for 10 years, working on businesses to do social good, like a nonprofit, but using revenue. So this is how I got here, just activism combined with business.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, Michael, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, name is Michael Royster, electrician, contractor. I teach electrical class. at NCI, East Orange in Jersey City.
Okay, thank you. Sydney, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Welcome to everyone who's here. I'm loving that this is being put on today. So thanks so much for organizing this, Beverly. I'm Sydney. I live on the west coast of Canada. I do Reiki. I'm a Reiki practitioner. I also diving into intimacy coaching, or supporting people in love and intimacy and sex and all those fun things. So, and it was actually, that's so cool that my summit birthed this idea. I was the host of Intimacy Ignited and it was so fun. That's how I got connected with Beverly and Ben. So I'm grateful to be here. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Maurice, he says Zoom music. When you get a chance, could you put your name up there, please?
How do I put my name up there?
Let me see if I can do it.
Well, how do I do it?
Okay, go look for your name on the participant.
I press more. Meeting, minimizing backgrounds and filters, chat. That's what I see. Raise hand. And I see
Okay,
other.
rename. I'm gonna.
We could do
You
it.
can put it up. You know how to do it?
I'm gonna try to do it for you.
Thank you. You feel so much appreciated. My name is Maurice Marbury. I'm a community activist. I created an organization that is the revitalization of Black Wall Street based on cultural awareness, education, economic development, and empowerment for us as a people. Certified mental health specialist. I do case management and counseling, predominantly relationship, say who calls me, predominantly relationship and marriage. And I also deal with wayward youth. Beverly Perryman, I want to thank you for allowing me to be a part. I think this is very, very powerful conversation that needs to be had.
Thank you for attending. Steve, tell us a little about yourself, please.
Hello, good night, everyone. My name is Steve, and this is my third Zoom meeting with Beverly and Carmen, and I'm enjoying it so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Eric Perryman, introduce yourself, please. He's our moderator.
Yes, I'm here. Evening, everyone. Well, you guys can see my name, so I don't have to repeat my name. So my background, I'm also a teacher, just like Carmen. My background with being a teacher means I deal with multiple personalities a day. So I guess you can also say I'm a psychologist, unofficially. So yeah, so I'm ready. Let's get started.
Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so I'm going to share my screen for a brief moment. Okay, this is our topic for tonight. What is toxic masculinity? And so I'm going to warn you guys, Carmen is going to rattle your cage. Okay, so, okay, as described here, toxic masculinity is used to describe how certain masculine traits cause harm to men themselves and are also harmful to women and others. Toxic masculinity can also assume all men are straight and cisgender and suggest that it is the way they should be. Of course, we know that's correct, which is of course not true. However, it is important to note that gay and trans men can also have toxically masculine traits. Toxic masculinity spreads a message that in order to be a real man, you have to suppress your emotions, act tough, and behave in a certain way. Showing any feminine trait is to show a sign of weakness. So I'm gonna pause that here for a minute. Okay, so Carmen, you want to take ask them the first question? So we kind of going to go in order and no special order. So when the question is asked, I don't know, Carmen, do you want to call a specific person?
You know what? I would call Eric, because Eric and I talked earlier in the week and we were both confused about the word toxic masculinity and bringing them together. So, and I'm sure that this was the first time I'm hearing about this. I know in the West Indian community, we call it macho man syndrome or whatever, right? So I really appreciate Mr. Miller coming and explaining what that looks like to us. So I wanted to know more about it. I want to know more about the topic. And perhaps we could have an honest discussion about how we grew up. You know, I get into this heated argument all the time, and I'm not making excuse for our Black women, but I feel that we have been, as usual, treated less than. And so I'm so thrilled that someone else is seeing things, you know, seeing the effect of this toxic, what is considered manhood, what we consider, you know, being a man in our community. So I'm really glad. Thank you, Eric.
Right.
I mean, Bev.
Right. And for me too, you know, I kind of have issues with the concept of it because also growing up, we always hear, okay, boys can't play with girls, don't play with their toys. You're supposed to play with trucks, and it's divided. And as they get older, you know, being Caribbean, they have all these terminology that we use for boys, young boys growing up, which we didn't use toxic, but there was other choice words that was used.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm here to learn. And of course, I'm going to ask some questions afterwards, because being a learner, I need to ask 99 million questions, right? So bear with me, please. Steve?
Yeah, can I help you?
Any questions?
No, I'm trying to learn about this toxic masculinity also. As you say, in the Caribbean, we describe it as being trying to be macho. So this toxic masculinity is a new phrase for me.
All right, so before I'm gonna hear from Ben and then Maurice. So Sydney, in the meantime, any thoughts? There's something that you want to put in the air?
Putting me on the spot here.
It's okay. I just allow us female to kind of, because you know, we're gonna get it from these men.
Yeah.
We will.
Something that just came through me just like when I was reading those slides was just like, how can we kind of combat this? And because I think it really just comes down to like acceptance, like, well, that's part of it, like accepting how one feels and how that's expressed, and then acceptance of others, because, you know, toxic masculinity, like, I think of all the times I've heard someone say, oh, you're such a pussy, like, for like having feelings. So it's just like, how do we just eliminate that shit and just like be accepting of people and how they express themselves, whatever gender they, you know, are. And yeah, that's just what came to mind initially.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
So you originally said for Carmen and myself to say like some opening words. So before we get to everybody else, I just want to kind of delve into a couple of things. As being a history teacher, you learn that as being men throughout society, through socialization, are taught that they have a specific role in society, right? And vice versa for women. So men are supposed to be the hunters, the protectors, the breadwinners, all this good stuff, right? So masculinity in its pure form is men being more aggressive than females, right? So if we look at our society, because this thing could be broken down into race, it could be broken down into gender, it could be broken down into so So there's different ways that you can attack this question, because of course, if you're talking about like the racial issue, then of course, when you look at history, if you want to think about toxic masculinity, because I've like read the article, is that if you look at it, you have to have a conqueror and conquered, right? So toxic masculinity, especially when we get into like the race issue, when we focus on slavery, is that those who were the enslavers and versus those who were enslaved, the enslaver had to have a certain mentality in order to suppress the natural nature of another man. So within itself, toxic masculinity is also the foundation of America, right? And then when you then transpose it into male-female roles, those men who were the conquerors to everyone else are now also the conquerors of women. So their mindset is also socialized into the people who are also conquered, if this makes sense. So, and I just want to close off with the class thing, because the class is also an important role. And it's also because, again, the people who have the most, those are still considered to be the conquerors, and the people who have the least are the conquered. So toxic masculinity has its roots in these three different categories. And I guess I'll explain more, let everybody talk, and then, you know, if anybody have any questions, we'll get more into it.
Can I jump in here?
Sure.
That was beautiful, Eric. And it reminded me of my time in India, 2 years, and hearing so many cases of toxic masculinity in regard to sexual assault and gang rape. And of course, sex trafficking in India, which is mostly female-based. So that is a great example of toxicity when we look at masculinity. And I've speculated for a long time, why did such a beautiful civilization become that way? And I do think it had a lot to do with being conquered or colonialized by the UK. And it took away this kind of macho pride that the men had. But now that I'm talking, I'll back up to some other things. I think we should start with asking, if there's some confusion about what toxic masculinity is, why don't we start by asking the panel, at which point does it become toxic? We all know what masculinity is, so it shouldn't be hard for us to start there. And then I think the end goal is to see, well, I think Sydney is right that the end goal should be improvement, but the real body of the conversation, I think, is who benefits from toxic masculinity, because I can't think of anyone. And I think that's the null hypothesis tonight. Is the null hypothesis is that no one benefits from it. But I bet if we dig into it, we'll see it's a little bit more complicated. For example, this conquering stuff, I think, is very tribal and goes back into our DNA to be, I think if we took a bunch of people and put them on an island, a bunch of babies, and they had no socialization at all, you would see them go into these archetypes. And then as we advance in civilization, we start to feel like some freedom to not have to act a certain way as a female or a male. But it can always reverse if we regress. So it's, you know, like the Renaissance, I think, was probably a time that people didn't have to be so masculine. And even before the Holocaust in Europe, it was very inclusive with LGBTQ. Life was awesome there, if you can believe that. But the problem is, at any time when we go into duress, we regress into these basic archetypes, it seems like. So maybe the person who benefits is not us, but the species itself, evolution and survival.
Well, I mean, we was coming into the,
Okay, more.
what toxic,
Okay,
toxic, any poison. It means something that causes another to regress and to go in reverse of something positive. That's what toxic. So we have to understand that, and it's not really every culture. Every culture has a form of toxic individuals in it, masculine men in it. But and I say this not to create a situation of racial discrimination or bias or anything of that nature. But when we look at the origin of man, being cute man, being people of color, then when you come through the processes of Europe, you start talking about Roman empires, things of that nature, when they began to come into Africa, Asia, different parts of the world, this conquering. That's where the colonizing and the conquering came in the process. And to be a man means that now I can conquer you. I can take over you. I can control you. I can do what it is that I choose to do to you. And that part is where it becomes toxic. When to be a man means that I can hurt you. I can beat you up. I can bully you. I can take from you no matter what it is.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Some person that in the public eye, they act like they're, I guess, they're homophobic, but they're really in the closet. Is that considered part of toxic masculinity?
I can't say that's toxic masculinity. You know what I'm saying?
I think they're a victim of toxic masculinity because they have to sacrifice who they are to conform.
So I have a question. I'm not really anybody. My name is India. It says India F up there. I'm just someone dwelling in this world with a son. I just want to know, are we saying, or when we're defining toxic masculinity, are you talking more of like patriarchal, or is you saying that that's a symptom of it? Or are you saying that those two things are different? Because I feel like a lot of the things that are being described now are talking about a patriarchy, because to me, masculinity inherently for men is something that needs to happen. There has to be some kind of structure for society in order to function. And as we all know, any community, you're only as strong as the men in your community. So I'm not understanding where this breakdown happens to where it's a bad thing for a man to be masculine. Not to say that, you know, if you have a feminine man, that's a bad thing. I feel like, you know, we're having a kind of different discussion, because there's one thing to have tolerance and there's another thing to have acceptance as well. But what I'm trying to understand, where's the downfall? Because me as a Black woman dwelling in this world in the Black community, I can say that from what I've seen so far, generally, not saying all, but a lot of Black men in particular, especially when compared to like my other white counterparts, maybe white or Asian, that there is a lack of actual masculinity, and that is part of the breakdown of the Black community.
Ben, can you answer?
Maurice, unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself? We can't hear you.
I wanted Ben to answer that question.
That was.
And then Maurice, we hear from him afterwards, please.
I was gonna ask India to clarify the last thing you said. There was a word I couldn't quite catch.
I said that the lack of masculinity in the Black community, as far as from what I can see, is a part of the breakdown of the Black community. I can't speak to everything as a whole, like I said, but just from my perspective as being a Black woman and being a mother and having a Black son, and just taking a step back and looking at the psychology of the men in our community versus the women, it seems to me that there has been a breakdown of masculinity within the Black community, and that is leading to the destruction of the Black community. Like, I understand that everybody cannot wear the same shoe, and it takes all kinds in order for the world to go round. But to say that these traditional roles don't play a part in what the downfall and destruction of the Black community is having, I think that that is a little bit of a fantasy world. And we don't live in a perfect world where everybody can just be, you know, kumbaya, let's hold hands and butterfly kisses.
Okay. So I didn't realize there was a breakdown in the community. I was thinking that men of color have the most pressure to act tough and that therefore they suffer the most from this pressure.
See, but my thing is, I don't equate masculinity to toughness. To me, that's something within itself. So I guess you could say that that
Yourself.
is toxic, but for masculinity, in my eyes, there's a certain role that a man needs to play and exhibit certain characteristics. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the toughest person around, because brawn doesn't always win against brain. However, I do feel like that, because if you talk to anybody, let's say Gen Z or millennials, for example, right, in regards to the Black community, I can't speak too much on any other community, even though I had conversations with some white men that I've encountered. And it seems as though when you do talk to these men in that form, right, in that area, Gen Z, millennial, or whatever, they feel as though they should be treated equal to women, so much so that instead of them comparing themselves to other men and see where they're lacking and why the community is what it is, they want to compare themselves to women. And that to me is unnatural, because again, a community is only as strong as their men.
Okay, so in India, I'm gonna let Maurice answer that for you
Okay.
as a Black man.
Black man growing up in the hood, you know, I've traveled across the globe, you know what I'm saying? And I sit on a table with a aristocrats, but I go to every hood in every city and state I'm in too. So I live on both sides of the line, so I can communicate from both perspectives. And I say that to say this, again, toxic masculinity. Part of being toxic and a masculine man is this: I can be a bully. I can beat you up. I can disrespect you. I can dog you, man or woman. To be a man means that I can stand up on my own. I can protect my family. I am a family man. I take care of my children if I have them. Someone else's if they're not mine. I'm a protector. I'm a part of what creates the village that raises the children. However, when that becomes toxic, it merely becomes, I'm going to take advantage of you. That's why it's broken down in our neighborhoods. And it's part of systematic mental manipulation, to where we are broken down to be as we were since the processes of slavery. And that goes through the process also of epigenetics. I don't know if y'all get to that, but we don't just pass down physical characteristics. You have your mother's eyes, your father's nose. We also pass down psychological traits. And this is part of the mental and emotional warfare that has been enraged and imposed upon the Black people. But again, it is great to be masculine, and our neighborhoods and our communities are being broken down because we are not masculine. And we have accumulated toxic masculinity. To be Black now and to be a man now means that I can be tough, I can beat you up, I can fight, I can kill you. That's toxic. We have to structure it back to what masculinity means. Again, just like you said, I'm going to take care of my woman. I'm going to take care of the people that are in my community and in my family. I'm going to take care of my children. I'm going to take care and hold my responsibility for what it is that I'm doing. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to take advantage of you, manipulate you like the colonizers did us. We have actually become what we hate.
So based on what both you and India are saying, is that there's nothing wrong for the most part with being masculine. And I think Marvin is also making reference to this because he's putting stuff in the chat, is that there's nothing wrong with masculinity. It's when you use your advantages in order to injure someone else. Because again, little history lesson, why did prohibition happen? And this is a question like to everybody, why did prohibition occur? See, y'all, all y'all failed history. That's sad. That's sad.
What prohibition?
Why did prohibition happen?
Why did prohibition happen? You talking about when the nights they used to have liquor?
Yep. Why did they make alcohol illegal?
Because they wanted to, certain people wanted to control it.
Well, that, and because if we get into the concept of toxic masculinity. So if you're a male, right? Because remember, prohibition kind of coincided with the Great Depression. So if you're a man and you're taught in a society that you're supposed to be the breadwinner if you don't have a job, most likely, how are you going to feel about yourself?
Not good.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
that
the
was
reason why prohibition took place was because those same men who didn't have a job and they felt like beneath the earth, they used to get drunk all day, every day. And the angers that they couldn't take out in the world, who did they take it out on? Their mates. They beat their children senseless. They beat their wives senseless. So prohibition occurred as a result of what y'all are defining as toxic masculinity, right? So,
it brings out the worst in guys, the alcohol.
exactly. So if you're a man and you're living in a society, and it kind of gets to Maurice's point about the whole racial aspect, because like I started this off by saying that race also plays a role. So just imagine if you're a black male or Mexican male or a non-white male, and you live in a society that says, yo, this is the pinnacle of what a man is. But then at every time that you try to exercise your manhood, that you can never live up to what society says is a man. So now, as you look at not just yourself, but people who also look like you look at yourself and people who look like you as inferior because you can't live up to the status quo of society. So toxic masculinity, especially for non-whites, it's revolves around trying to live up to what societal norms that you can never live up to.
That's partly.
Can I ask a question to Ben? Do you think toxic masculinity is a behavior that's learned or is it innate?
Oh, I think it's innate. I think it's the lowest common denominator, and it's not impressive. You know, to be toxic is to be the most basic you could be. You haven't elevated yourself beyond your basic primitive self, like sex and violence. So the more advanced we get as a culture and individually, we're able to free ourselves from those archetypes that I think we're basically born with after millions of years of killing each other and raping each other.
And so how do you fix something that's innate? Because if it's a learned behavior, let me finish, please. If it's a learned behavior, then you can do what you can to repair it, right? But
Yes.
if you're saying it's innate, that means it's a part of your DNA. So how do we recover from something that's affecting our society if it's innate?
I don't know. That's why we're here.
Maurice, go ahead. You have your hand raised.
Part of the whole human culture, I don't care who you are, you know what I'm saying? Some of us have, I don't know if many of you believe in the Bible or not, or different things of that nature, but I want to talk about how we are born to love. It has actually been proven to where they had two babies next to each other. One, they changed, the other one, they changed fed, they picked it up and played with it and did the goo goo gagas. That baby grew. The baby that they did not have affection for, it began to digress. His immune system began to break down and things of that nature. This is us. Now, it is innate in us to love. Very few of us come out to where we can just be brutal. So I say that to say the majority of us are loving. We're caring. It is innate in us to have humanity. You see what I'm saying? So the thing is, me, and I talked about epigenetics earlier. Epigenetics is actually a form of mental and emotional warfare, to where the system has placed on us as a people to where, again, you don't just pass down physical characteristics, but you can also pass down psychological traits. But just like you can be, I was the most loving little boy you ever wanted to meet in your life. The reason that I do all the things that I do now, community activism, psychology, dealing with children, relationships, is because I was abused. And my abuse actually grew up to be the man that I was groomed to be as a boy. So I became abusive. 18 years, a madman on the streets. But I remember, even though it was groomed into me to be aggressive and angry and upset, I trained myself to do something other than. So even though it is innate in some of us to be brutal, because this is again through the processes from slavery, through the mental and emotional manipulation, guess what we can do? If you are around people like Beverly Perryman is one of the organizations that I'm in. And what we always talk about is associate yourself with people who will motivate and inspire you to feel better, to live better, to be better financially. And this is what we need to do as a people. So even though this may be innate in you, if you can see somebody that's acting in these attributes, you can assist them if you choose to, if you have the patience and if you have the tolerance. And if they can catch a piece of what it is that you're doing and they like it, guess what? They can also change. It's us. We have to change one another. We can initiate that process.
That sounds really promising, epigenetics. I'll have to look into that. I think that's what I was trying to say, is that it's not really innate, like born into us, but that on a cultural level, when things fall apart, we always end up back in these polarized archetypes of femininity and masculinity. So what I meant is like social tension is inevitable. So it'll produce these regressions. But yeah, if everyone was raised beautifully, then I guess it's not really innate.
All right. So archetype means that something that describes a person or a thing, right? So like you could describe Batman without actually giving him a name, right? Or Superman, stuff like that. What I wanted to ask you, can you tell us, how does toxic masculinity appears? What are some of the examples of that?
I feel like I've been talking too much. Should we give Sydney a chance?
Sure, I can take a crack at that one. I think an aspect that comes to mind for me when I think about toxic masculinity is when other people really berate or like dismiss people who, I'll just say men, like showing up in their feminine, showing up soft, showing up emotional, and then people are, like I said earlier, they're being called out for being a pussy or whatever. Like that to me is toxic masculinity, because it's just like, oh, like on the slides earlier, it was like, I can't remember exactly what it said, but it's like, oh, if you don't act this way, or if you don't show yourself, present this way, then you're seen as not a real man. It's like you have to suppress your emotions, and it's just like, so if you were to like say you're feeling sad, or even let on that you're like feeling anything around that, it's like, oh, you're not a real man, you're not living up to this like standard of someone who created this, like, this is a man and this is what they show up as and this is how they're supposed to act. Like, so to me, toxic masculinity is like anyone who's dismissive of like people who are just showing up in any way that's not fitting the bill.
Yeah, and in terms of archetypes, there's
I'm sorry.
Feminine and masculine are archetypes, not genders. Anyone can be masculine, anyone can be feminine. So
Can I say something before I get out of here? I have to go. Please forgive me for having to leave, but let me say something before I get out of here. The sister was speaking about some of the traits that you can see or the attributes you can see. Let's take this back to being a kid from the moms. Miss Beverly Perryman said this when she first came on. We are told from infancy, little boys, it's okay for little girls to play jacks and hopscotch and sit on the porch and not get dirty, but it's okay for little boys to climb trees, fall down, and get stitches. From infancy, little boys are taught, do not cry. Big boys do not. Let me explain something to you. That shuns any and every emotion in a little boy. It stunts his mental and emotional growth. When you're in school, guess what happens? All the ladies here can agree with this. When a guy likes you, he didn't tell you he liked you, he pulled your hair. He pushed you. told you he was gonna beat you up after school. That's how he told you he liked you.
No, that's what we told them. We as educators and adults, we say to the girls, oh, he does that because he likes you. I don't buy I don't tell my students that because I understand how this could have some repercussions, right? So that is not something, because then women grow into abused relationship, thinking that if this man doesn't pull her hair, knock her teeth out, bang her jaw in, then he doesn't love her. And
That's what we
go ahead.
are we saying the same thing. That's what I said. You some psychological traits of toxic masculinity. I said, let me show you even from infancy. A little boy likes you, he pulls your hair. He tells you he's going to beat you up after school. He's on your butt. He don't say, I like you, you're pretty, you're cute, I like your shoes. He becomes aggressive because this is what he learned. And only we can begin to show him something different. Moms, big boys do cry.
Okay.
I'm about to say, I feel sorry for y'all because like I don't know what middle school y'all went to, because y'all need some hugs. Like,
okay, so Maurice, before you leave,
Yes.
I have a question. When men are trained to block their emotions, do they lose the ability for empathy?
Like,
everybody can answer that.
What you do is you control it. You control how you feel it, and even
we can't hear you.
Oh, can you? I didn't say, even though you do shun that, you stay that off. Like, even though you may feel something, you wait till you get by yourself to express and explain it, but it's only to yourself. You don't say it to anybody else. You can't allow anybody to say that. Like, I didn't say words like cute, pretty, and beautiful until I was 19. The first time I told my mother I loved her, I was 16, and I had to tell her because the staff in detention home made me say it. But this is what I was groomed. Big boys don't cry. When you say big boys don't cry, what we do is this. We begin to take anything away from us that we feel is sensitive or feminine or girly, even the actions and the attitudes. That's why we pull your hair when we like you. That's why we say we're gonna beat you up after school. And we have to learn to grow that back. It can be groomed back. Like in my book coming out, out of all the thousands of people that I've been through around in my life that abused me, I remember 6 people that made me feel good. And those 6 people helped me change. Just the thought of them and the things in the way, in the nice ways they treat me. So it can be done. Masculinity, toxic masculinity is often taught, it can be ingrained in us, but it's something that can be unlearned, and it's something that can be reversed and that needs to be reversed. You know, I teach it.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Michael, I see you have your hand up. You haven't said anything all night.
Yes, well, listening to what I'm hearing and the toxic masculinity, obviously we know it to be of a male, but it's an unhealthy expression of that. So yeah, history, and there are people who are in a position of power seems to make that the way it is, which is why women, when we talk about voting, that didn't happen. Women, white women, really were pushing that. And I think that happened like maybe 1919, something like that. But it was the maleness that seemed to dictate the white male of this state, just from history, was pushing that. So then out of all the other women were following suit, well, I can do what you can do, or the term men and women should be created, excuse me, when it comes to pay, created equal, of equal pay, excuse me. So here we are as males, as time continued to be upon us, we're learning from history. And it is true what I believe he said about epigenetics. That's part of it. And it is learned as well. We learned this.
So, and I'm kind of disappointed Maurice left because I had like a couple questions to ask him, especially when it comes to young children and how they develop. Because ironically, like I have like a bunch of younger children that I now pay attention to how they do certain things, right? So I just left my cousin's house and he has both a daughter and a son. So the daughter, I think she's about to be 6 or 7, one either or. So she sits at the table and she's just talking me to death. So one of the things that she says to me, and it's ironic that I'm like, it's crazy that she's asking me this question. She said, "Well, Uncle, Dad says I talk too much. Do you think I talk too much?" And I'm thinking to myself, why are you telling this little girl that she talked too much? Oh my God, you're kind of messing her up. And then it's ironic because the same my niece, like in her first, and this is like her 6 years of knowing me, this is the first time she's ever had a conversation with me. So usually every time she sees me, she runs away. I don't know why. So today was like the real first day where her and I are actually sitting down and we're having a conversation with each other. And one of the things that her mom said to me was, as being a parent, I don't want to force my child to speak to an adult, right? So is that more so of her being mindful as an adult that, you know, you don't really have to talk to everybody? Because you know how you meet certain people and they say, oh, this person don't talk to me, they think they're better than, or is it like a safety valve in the mind where I'm saying like, listen, I don't really know this person. I'm trying to really get to feel this person out. So I'm being more cautious around this person because I'm trying to see, it's like a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a comfortability. So is it this young girl trying to be comfortable around me because she knows I'm a male? On the flip side is that my cousin's son, who's a male, as soon as he sees me, he's running up to me, like punching me in the leg and stuff. So when Maurice was talking about learned behavior, is that because, you know, we have the thing about nature versus nurture, right? So my niece, she's being more cautious because she's trying to fill me out versus the son who's just like, hey, this is another guy. Let me run up to him and be more physical with him. So how does that also play a role, the natural thing of what young children do? And this is open to every.
You want to answer that?
It sounds pretty textbook to me because so the female child is being more expressive and emotional, just getting her, she's able to express herself. Whereas the boy is doing nonverbal communication using violence, even though it's motivated by affection, because that's what guys do, right? We don't hug each other, we punch each other. Like that's how, as long as we're making physical contact, then we feel good about it. And all the baseball players smack each other on the butt, but it's not gay, you know? That's a whole other conversation.
But this is the point. But this is the point I'm trying to make, because like Maurice and Carmen, they were saying that, you know, when a boy is trying to show you that he likes you, he's doing more physical things compared to the female, where it's like, okay, I like you, I'll giggle, I'll do certain things around you. So is it really toxic masculinity if by nature a male uses his physicality in order to express himself versus the female who's more subtle, more what's the word I'm looking for? I don't even know, but more of a non-physical in order to get the male's attention?
Can I answer that?
Sure. This is open to anybody. I'm just asking a question.
Yeah. So what I said was that in the past, when I was growing up, that's what we were told, right? That a boy's being a boy, he likes you. If he bangs you in the face, he likes you. If he yanks your hair, he likes you. I said, what I'm doing now is to make sure that the students in my classroom don't buy into that, because that's not normal. And in general, what I find is that boys who are really aggressive as they're growing up and treating girls like that, I guarantee you that some of them end up being abusive men in their relationships as they grow older. So I don't want girls growing up thinking that it's okay for a man to beat them up or to grow up into a woman thinking that this is normal behavior or that's something, if he doesn't beat me, he doesn't like me. I'm not buying into that, and I'm not spreading that either.
Mm.
All right. So Marvin, his volume is kind of messed up. So he's been sending me messages. So it's I just want to read what he's been sending me because I told him like if he lets message me, I'll speak on his behalf. So he talks about how many of the emotions that our people seem to embrace are not part of our psychological makeup. We happen to be ensconced into a round hole, square peg situation in this culture. The sister was right about there not being enough masculinity within the so-called Black community. And at this point, there are far too many feminine Black males. So I'm guessing this is his response to India. But again, the question is, how are men supposed to interact within a society? Because, and this is why in the beginning of this, I talked about the 3 different levels of masculinity. You have men versus women, you have racism versus men, and then you have class versus men. So you have all these different things that's affecting how our perception of what we need to be. And then also what we haven't talked about yet is also culture, right? Because culture is very prevalent in how we view the world. So just imagine, right? Watching TV, all the heroes growing up are white males, right? You had your John Wayne, you have your now you have all these Marvel superheroes. In the 80s, you had Rambo, you had what's this Arnold Schwarzenegger, where these big tough guys, you know, you don't cry, you don't do these certain things. So just imagine you've been watching this your whole life and like this is the role of a man, right? Now and nowadays, you know, especially with music and music being so prevalent, now you're taught you know, busting guns, doing so a lot of people are taking this in, and then this is what they think that a man should be, right? So we're living up to, again, societal roles of what men should be, but we don't define our own roles, right? So I say this to say this is that how do we define our own roles? Because again, well, matter of fact, this is open to anybody because once somebody say something, then I'll have something to say back. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Can I add with that? Because again, I'm going a little bit with the history and where it comes from and who we are as different people coming over here to this America. Because again, going to the Constitution, speaking about all men are created equal, like the 14th Amendment. You know, it's talking about how people are born in the US, reside, and the state shall enforce that they wouldn't enforce anything that go against the privileges of the citizens, their life, their liberty, their property. So then when we're talking about culture and the different people and European whites as opposed to the American whites, there's certain, again, the males, the white males, they were the ones who were in position of power. So again, when you were making a statement about what we were watching on TV and the Marvel and the DC, because I grew up on comics, that's what we seen. So now they're trying to make the character a little more color. They're trying to add to it. This is what they want us to see. So the unhealthy, poisonous-like toxicity of the male is what a lot of us, women of all cultures, have been seeing. So we are trying, whoever we are, trying to go against that. And we want to express ourselves. The love, okay, the certain way that certain males of power have us, the masses, see it. So the Constitution was made pretty much, who was in that room? The white males. They were in the power.
Steve,
That's some of what I'm getting.
Sorry. Steve
Go
had his
ahead. Go ahead.
Carmen, you're muted.
Steve,
Carmen, you're muted.
Are you sure?
Hi, this is India. I wanted to jump in really quickly if I could. So I think that maybe I was raised differently, but to equate aggression to masculinity was something that actually in my family, with the men in my family, was seen as a very feminine trait. From my understanding, the way that it was taught to me by the men in my family is not that a man is not to have emotions, because you're a human being at the end of the day. That's the base of it. But it's to be more in control of your emotions and logical about it. And that when you are ultra aggressive, from the men in my family, that was looked at as a feminine trait. That women fly off the handle or were less in control of their emotions and fly off and can't control themselves. So in my family, a man that was ultra aggressive wasn't even looked at as masculine, but actually feminine. That was a feminine characteristic. Because a man is in control of his emotions. It is healthy for you to express them, but it's in the manner in which you do express them that is the problem. And in regards to what Perryman said, as far as culture goes, I don't think that, you know, the men look at these facades, aka rappers and everything, and look at them as men, but more so trying to attain the position of a thug or a gangster. That's what people want to aspire to be.
Right.
That's interesting.
When I have discussions,
India, if you don't mind me asking, what culture, I'm sorry, India, what culture is that? Just
so my mother.
No, you said in your culture, so I'm just curious.
I'm just saying as African American culture.
Okay.
Within the Black community. And the reason why I say this is because I'll give you an example of, for example, my brother. A lot of the characteristics that he exudes are the same mannerisms and characteristics that my mother exudes. And when I compare that to, for example, my father or my grandfather, it's like, okay, this is unacceptable. This is very, very unacceptable. And the reason why I came to this conclusion is because I was having a conversation with my father one day, and he said to me that I was more of a man than my brother was. And then he gave me examples of that. And then when I looked and I compared it, and when I saw my mother and how she reacted to certain things, which was very irrational, emotional off the top, it was like, you know what? And then I started looking at the other women in my family and realizing that, you know what? It may not be true, but all the way true for every woman, but it is very, very, very true that he is exuding things that I've only seen women do. And to me, that is not a good thing. I'm not now, and us being human beings, we're all going to have feminine and masculinity in us, but one is stronger than the other. I do not believe in equality. I believe in equity. I do not want to do everything that a man can do. And as a single mother who has be the head of the household and to carry these mannerisms and carry the house and pay all the bills and do it, I am exhausted being in the more masculine role. And then, as I said, looking in and then talking to my brothers and cousins and some other Black men, I've realized that it's the lack of masculinity that is the problem and the feminization of them. And not only that, but a victimhood there. And I understand everything about slavery and how these things are passed down. But at what time do we say that we're going to stop having that trust? Because if you look at it statistically, Black women are leading in education and entrepreneurship. So why is it that the men in the community are not following suit?
Okay, India, well, you know what? I think even in my family, the women are the stronger, dominant one, except for you, Eric, not you. But no, most of the I watch them, even the ones who are married, their wives are, they are the ones that are strong, the head of the household, even though the man is there. When it comes to disciplining the children, it's like, go to your mother. And I think that has a lot to, because when I was growing up, the females was dominant in the family. So we just took on that and went along with it. And I think for sometimes women like us have to pick the weaker men because we don't want them to overpower us.
But don't you find that to be exhausting to be head of the household and more in a masculine role? I'm just saying, because I know for myself, that is one of the things, and from personal experience, which I hate to admit this, but it is true. For me, I am drawn to a more masculine man. When I was in a relation with a man who was more feminine and in touch with his emotions, I ran all over him. And that was not by me
Well,
purposely doing the natural
that's like
progression.
Sydney just said. We call them pussies. Like, we don't want a weak man. We don't want a man that, the yes man. So yeah, we would look for that. But guess what? Some of these men cannot match up to us, to our standards. So most of us kind of like settle in between.
Right.
But yeah, it is exhausting. But guess what? We didn't pick that role, but we just have to go along with it because that's the way it is for most of us, especially African-American women.
You know what's funny? That the conversation that y'all are having right now, and it brings me like to something that happened earlier today. Because like I was having I was having a conversation because when I speak, like people listen. But
He's dominant.
No, but it's not even a thing about being dominant. It's like after the conversation happened, right? Because it was myself, the principal of the school, and just the secretary and another coworker. So, I guess people get excited when I speak because most of the time at work I don't speak. But certain things that I'm gonna speak on because, like, my thing is, if you allow certain things to keep happening, then it's gonna create what's called a slippery slope. Then now somebody's gonna keep taking advantage of the situation. So at work, I'm expressing myself by saying, like, listen, this is not how things need to be. So I guess the tone, the aggressiveness of how I was speaking. So the principal, he was ignoring me because I guess he was like not trying to. So after the situation, I'm in the room. He comes in the room and he says, like, these females are really trying to put you and I against each other because they see how you talk to me and they feel as though, oh, you came disrespectful. And I was gonna say to him, like, I guess these women aren't used to men talking because they took what I said to you personal and you didn't take it personal because you're a man. You understand what I'm saying as I'm saying it. But of course, these same two females, I guess they're not used to having a male in their life because the one female who's my coworker, she has a son. His son is not aggressive at all. He's more of like I don't want to use a negative adjective, but
And that's
yeah. So the other one, she's single and she can't find a man if her life depended on it. So
how you know that?
Because the conversation that she's telling me that I don't want to hear, and I'm like, why are you telling me this? It's none of my business how you live your life. We're co-workers, not friends. But that's a different story for a different day. So the point is that because, and I guess this is getting back to India's point, because in our communities we don't see men interact with each other. We don't know how men actually interact with each other. So
in a healthy way, right?
I'm sorry, say that again, India.
No, I was saying in a healthy way.
Oh, there we go. Because again, even though I was aggressive and I was assertive and bold with what I was saying, the man didn't take what I was saying personal. It was the female that was like, "Oh, how dare he talk to you like this?" And he was like, and he's just like, this is how he expresses himself. He came to me, he came to me, he was like, listen.
Men and women take things differently.
And this is the point that I'm trying to say. So when we talk about masculinity within itself, is that if I'm talking to a man, especially a man that's up there in age, he's used to interacting with other men. When you have a conversation with him, because I speak to him the same way how I'm speaking right now with aggressive tone, like the same way I speak to anybody for the most part. So most people would take my tone to be disrespectful. Like, who are you talking to like this? This is how I talk. This is how men talk. They talk assertive and they talk aggressively. And most people just like, oh, like, whoa, 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 throw them back by. But I'm like, because even like people, like other men who I talk to, when they talk to me just like this, I don't sit there and take what they say personal. I'm like, all right, cool. You disagree? Cool. And we move on with our day. I don't take what they say personal. They don't take what I say personal. We gonna either agree or we gonna disagree.
Okay, I want to, touch on that, what you're saying, Ben. That's a conversation that we had in the beginning of this, when you said people misinterpret who you are because you're soft-toned. So can you speak on that? You're muted, Ben.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, I mean, the idea is that everyone suffers from toxic masculinity to some degree. And I think the ignored population is the men who have freed themselves of this only to be punished for it, which is me. Because I was like a normal guy, quote unquote, in high school and popular with women. And then I got radicalized in college, which is classic for activists, because you meet these real activists and a lot of them are feminists. So I got really interested. I got involved in feminism as an activist. Like I even participated in a or demonstration in front of MTV in Wall Street. I mean, in Times Square, and started my own feminist group called Feminists United in college. And it was really rewarding and unlocked a rainbow of emotions that I didn't even know I had. And the repercussions since then have not stopped. It's like everyone just thinks I'm gay, and it's become a lot harder to get feminine women, you see. So the polarization is, the more masculine you are, the more of a feminine chick you can get. So it's true. It's really true. And these things work reciprocally. There's no toxic masculinity without toxic femininity. That's why you have fraternities and sorority houses polarizing what it means, literally institutionalizing and polarizing what it means to be a male and a female. But still, who benefits from it? Not necessarily them either. Maybe just capitalism that makes all these superhero movies and stuff selling what it means to be a guy. Go ahead, Carmen.
So Steve wanted to say something for the longest. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I grew up experiencing toxic masculinity for a long time because my mom her ex-husband was the type of guy that like to throw his weight around to prove that he's the man. But I was determined I wasn't going to be that type of man when I grew up. I went the other way, and my older brother, he became my stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
He got that kind of mentality like my mom's ex-husband. So we both went in different directions. And I could remember, like, I used to take my son to school, and on the mornings he would give me a kiss, you know. So when he reached about like maybe 9, 10, I know the kids, when they get that type of age, they don't like to see their friends see them, you know, kissing their dad and all kind of stuff like that. So one morning he said, "You're gonna let your friends see you kissing your dad?" He said, "Listen, it's not my problem. They don't have a dad. I have a dad. That's their problem." So I removed that toxic masculinity from my life in my own way. I deal with my kids opposite to how my stepdad did with me. So that's my take.
Nice.
Okay. Ben, okay, somebody text me a question. Ben, they want to know how to cure or heal toxic masculinity, and does it need to be healed?
Just
That question is for Ben specifically.
Does anything need to be healed? No, but it's always nice when it gets healed, right? Nothing really matters at the end of the day. No one remembers anyone born 400 years ago for the most part. So, you know, I'm an existentialist. So, but if we want to, you know, improve our experience while we're here, existing on Earth, this is something we can do. Doesn't have to be done, but it would improve the quality of life for almost everyone on the planet.
Right. I think I'm
So-
listening to everyone, and I think there's a confusion between masculinity and toxic masculinity, right? So there's toxic means poison, no good. When I think about toxic, I think about something I need to run away from, right? Like the gas in the house that's not good for me, you know, like a husband coming home. Like I grew up with that. Husbands coming home, beating the children, beating the wife, because he felt he wasn't a man outside, because he probably wasn't in the best job, probably didn't have the best education, right? So he was dehumanized outside of the home throughout the day. And instead of coming home and explaining to his wife what was happening in his life, he took out all his frustration. And so I look at toxic masculinity as using your power to bring harm to the people around you. That's what I'm thinking when I hear the word toxic masculinity. Not who's a man, who's not a man, but what being a man and how it hurts the people around you. That's where the word toxic comes from. So I want us to stay focused on that. If
So,
we want to
yeah,
talk about
thanks for that.
gender roles, if we want to talk about gender roles another time, that's fine. But what is toxic masculinity? How does it affect our community? And who benefits from it?
I mean, if we could just answer that last question tonight, that would be huge. If we could think of a single person that benefits from it, then we've succeeded in answering this question. And the
I
only
feel like
person,
dominant society benefited off of toxic masculinity. And when I say that, I do mean white people. You guys have benefited drastically from toxic masculinity. This is how you were able to set yourself in place where you are now to be part of the dominant society and to have your role at the table. You
Right.
secure through toxic masculinity.
that goes back to the conquering conversation and everything. But the point at which it becomes toxic is when we assume that everyone who's a male or everyone who's white has to be this way. Because I'm telling you, I might have benefited a lot from white privilege, but I don't think toxic masculinity has done shit for me, except maybe get me laid in high school before I got woke, you know, like.
But it gave you, did it not? Toxic masculinity, men super asserting themselves and being the conquerors to the conquered. Didn't that coincide with you having white privilege? Didn't that secure you to have that privilege?
Yeah, I got the privilege, but on the side of toxic masculinity, I feel like all I got was guilt, like for all the conquering. I don't take any pride in what my ancestors did. I'm mostly Jewish, by the way, but still.
No, this is not to demean you by any means, but we are living in America and there is a dominant society and then there is the others. So it's not to demonize your people or anything like that. I'm just calling a thing a thing.
No worries. And I always think about it in terms of the separatists, is that what it's called? No, women getting the right to vote, right? First it was males, then it was Black males, then finally white females. And then we look at the president and we got a white guys, then we got Obama, but we couldn't get a female yet. So there's like this order that says that masculinity is more important than race. You know, that's how society treats us. That I enjoy more perks because I'm white, but all of us guys benefit to some degree from the social status that we have.
Ben, I don't think you would want to be a Black man for 1 minute in your life.
Yeah. I was about to say, I don't think masculinity supersedes whiteness. I don't think that at all.
But
Right?
what
As a
about
mother
the
of a
voting
Black boy.
and the president thing?
So,
I'll tell you what. Sorry.
Oh, because do you know what? Well, you should know what neocolonialism is, right?
Heard of it.
So neocolonialism. So to say that a black man becoming president kind of supersedes like a white woman, that's ludicrous. Because racism basically is a group of people, both male and female, because feminism, when you think about it, is a white thing. So my thing is, if you are a black male in America, why would you care about feminism? Because as a being a black man, I don't have any power to control any white woman or any woman in America.
I think,
And,
Eric, what
wait. And more so is that how many black men in this country have been lynched, not because they actually raped a white woman, because they've been accused of it. Right. So my thing is, being a white woman supersedes being a black man any day.
Except in power, because white men do not like white women in power. I mean, I've been in corporate America that when a white woman get a promotion, that white man will come on and say, that effing B, that I know I got to answer to that. And they go simply ballistic. That's why even when they were running for president, one of the things they were saying, we'd rather have a black man in the White House than a white woman. And that's factual.
But here's the thing, what I would like to know.
I'm about to say, I don't know what news y'all be watching, because the news that
I've experienced it. I'm speaking from being in corporate America and listening
to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying.
It must be family.
If a white woman is married to a white man, if she has a promotion, it still benefits white people collectively.
Of course it is. But even look at it now. White men do not like to be controlled by the white woman, the white counterpart. That's how they look at it. Yeah, they go home to their wife. That's all well and good. But to be in the workplace, they do not accept that.
And so what Eric is, what I'm saying to Ben is, our black men have had to take a back seat to many races, to many culture, to many situations, right? And by that I mean, white man dominates black men. They've institutionalized this modern day form of enslavement. And so one of the reasons why the black families have a lot of toxic men is that men have been taught to be powerful. And if you're not powerful on your job, and if you're not powerful in the police station when you get arrested, if you're not powerful when the police pulls you over, where are you going to exert that power? At home, correct?
Mm-hmm. Okay. For those who are listening, this is called the uncomfortable conversation. So we are open to everything. So just so be mindful, it's uncomfortable conversation. Go ahead, please. I just had to make that announcement.
Oh, sorry, was that for me, Carmen?
No. We having the conversation and we're live. So I just want people to understand the concept of the conversation. So what they're going to hear. It's not personal. I just want everybody to understand that.
It's not personal. And so what I want to know is, men are told, and black men, it filters in from the TV, it filters in from the news about what a man looks like, how a man should speak, how a man should behave. And yet black men has to know their place in society. They have to know how to speak to the cop, somebody that's calling them a boy instead of being treated like a man. On their job, they're being made to feel like if they're this big, right? And all of this is built up tension, and they're going home with this. So who ripped the benefit of this toxic masculinity? Who benefits?
People can make money off of it. I can say that.
I'm about to say that. I think we've kind of answered this question, dating back to like the early start of this, especially when Maurice was talking. He was talking about, the system of racism is based on it. Also, again, from a cultural standpoint, it's like somebody has to benefit from this, right?
Right.
Because, and I guess again, we've already touched on it, like who benefits from it, which is
So
capitalists.
the benefiters, and who's capitalist? Who is capitalist? Who runs our banks? Who runs our institution? So
Like
who
the
benefits?
fraternity, the trustees of a fraternity, those are gonna be like successful dudes, right?
And who are they? Mostly white guys, right?
Yeah, like the 1%. And they're telling these young kids, this is what it means to be a guy, and this is how you treat women. It seems like, but even they are victims. I mean, we're at the end of the day, no one's really healthier because of it, and health is wealth. So even if they're getting rich off it, it doesn't mean, like Donald Trump, is he happy? He's a toxic male. So he got the power like we talked about, but at the end of the day, life is about happiness.
So as the mother of a son, how do I help my son overcome this tendency to be a toxic, masculine, African-American man?
It just doesn't feel safe to us. If you can make it feel safe and make him feel like there's not going to be a lot of consequences, like not ever getting laid again, for example, not that you can talk about that necessarily, but I can think of a few there are consequences. I did this transformation and I'm still paying the price for it. So we can't really rest assured that there won't be consequences. The truth is that the world will punish anyone who's not acting a certain way.
So is patriarchy and toxic masculinity, is that one and the same, or is that something different?
Say that again. Is patriarchy and what the same?
Is patriarchy and toxic masculinity, is that one and the same? Is that a symptom of it? Is that what we're saying, or are they two totally different things?
They're two totally different things, because patriarchy deals with being the head of a family, sort of like your lineage, right? So if you lived in like ancient China, they wanted boys. Why? Because in a succession of a family is always the males who are supposed to be the heads of family. Toxic masculinity, on the other hand, is as being a male, I guess you can say your emotional instability creates the toxicity of being masculine.
And creates a hostile environment for the people around you.
But there must be an overlap between the two. I think it would be a great blog post, or a great equal conversation.
Okay, so here's a question. I think this question is going to be directed at most of the male disappeared. What's up? Oh, okay. So do you believe, okay, so Ben, do you believe that it would be more acceptable to say male fragility than toxic masculinity?
Male fragility?
Fragility.
Being fragile.
Yeah, that would be the opposite, right?
Yeah.
How are they fragile?
Would it be more accepted to say that versus toxic?
No,
but if
I think
somebody's beating the crap out of you, how are they fragile?
Yeah, that doesn't sound quite right.
Does that sound right? What do we put it?
That's a question. I'm reading a question, so I'm asking it.
Right.
Well, it sounds like
ask the question again.
The question is, do you believe that it would be more acceptable to say that male fragility versus toxic masculinity?
So
meaning that because from right,
that male being fragile how?
Versus because I don't know. I'm asking the question as I'm getting it, so I'm asking the question.
So what I'm saying is, because Fragile how? Is he fragile emotionally? Is he fragile mentally? Like how is he fragile?
I would think that, you know, basically there's two description of being toxic, because gay men are considered toxic, correct?
How?
So
How
that
am I?
way, meaning, no, 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 if you read all the definition, that's one of them,
I
meaning
know
that it's
exactly
not
what you mean.
necessarily true. We're not saying it's true. We're saying considered, according to society. That's one of the things. If a man acting like a girl, when you look at the guys, that the gay guy, they wearing a dress, what do you say? Oh, he's toxic, is this. So it's basically in line with saying, is that consider him being fragile, using that terminology?
I think calling a guy fragile is an act of toxic masculinity or femininity, depending on who's asking it. Because you're holding this guy to a standard that he didn't ask to be held to. And
absolutely.
But I see the point of that the term toxic could be used to look at whatever you don't like. I don't like this kind of men, so I'm going to call that kind of guy toxic. But what people generally are meaning when they say toxic on Twitter, hashtags and everything, is the guy who's acting with the machismo.
But in society, these infrastructures in order for society to go around, I feel like without, because I know people like to stay away from boxes and compartmentalizing things, but this is how we know a thing is a thing, right? This is why we know we call a chair, a dresser, a drawer, a drawer. Why is that a bad thing to say to someone what you see? Why is it inherently bad if a man is fragile to say that that man is fragile or that woman is fragile? Why is it this whole thing of, oh, let's just erase all the names and all the brands? Why is that? Why is that such a problem? Because for me, this is how you can relate one thing to another. And no offense to you, Ben, but if I'm home with my man, right, and a burglar comes in, I don't want the most feminine man by my side to protect me, because I feel like inherently you're probably not. And when
That's what I'm saying about how we regress in duress.
But when I've dated more feminine men, you know, because I thought to myself, I want a man who's more in touch with his emotions and everything like that. They looked at me the same way that they will look to another man. And that became a problem for me. If there's a burglar coming to my house, I want someone who can protect me. Okay. I don't want somebody who's going to sit up here and say, oh my God.
Okay, I think that's just good masculinity. That's not toxic masculinity. Self-defense, you know. I do martial arts, but I don't do that as.
This is what I'm saying. For a woman, inherently, you want someone that can give you security, can give you protection, right? And that you know that if anything were to happen, if you were going down the street or something, if you have a man with you as a woman, you feel more secure, right? But if I can't look at you, right, get into you any kind of masculinity whatsoever, then that leaves insecurity there, to where it's like, if something were to happen, can I actually count on you to protect me? And I feel like that is a natural defense, because as you said, as human beings, our whole thing is to progress, to have security and to have protection and to have a provider, right? So,
but I think we're talking about gender roles, if I hear you correctly,
Right.
India. We're not talking about gender roles. We're talking about how toxic behavior affects our men, and what can we do to change that?
right.
What compassion? So it's not about, excuse me, it's not about whose role is doing what. We're talking about the men that feel that they're machismo and they're the man. You're not gonna speak to me like that because I'm the man. You're gonna get me my food. You're gonna give me some sex when I feel like it, without, even if you're married to the person, understanding that she might not be feeling well tonight, but because you feel you're the man and that you are her husband, you're gonna take that sex. That's what we're talking about. That's what this conversation about?
Well, I
It-
feel like
it's
it's convoluted in
power.
the beginning. Ben was
Power.
saying that being a more feminine man that he experienced toxic masculinity. So are we saying that we're supposed to be embracing more feminine men? But
No,
That's
what
why
we're
I said
India,
saying is,
India, what? There is nothing wrong with the men have emotions just like we do as female. So one of the questions was, why, if they go through experience, why can't a man come out and say, you know what, you hurt my feelings, or you know what, sit and
Oh,
cry?
and
Even
I
with
think
men, even if
I
their
think
mother died or someone, they're not expected to cry. You're supposed to be strong. You know, if they hurt, they
Suck
broke
it
up with the
up.
girlfriend, they're expected to just suck it up.
I
He
think
has feelings just the way we do and should be able to express it
I think
without
India
being considered toxic.
I think India kind of expressed her preference. So she would prefer a more, I'm not going to say toxic man, but more of a man who, when you walk by him, you know, oh, that's a damn man, whatever that means.
Okay,
So
but
her thing is like she wants to feel protected by an actual man. She don't want a man that's going to be all in his feelings and all. She don't. She's saying this is her preference. So, and I think again, like what we're veering off here is that the word toxic is subjective, not objective.
right.
Because what you might think is toxic, the next person might think is awesome. So I think
right.
like the whole thing as we're sitting here trying to define it, I think how we define certain things is also based on our experiences, our
Yes.
perspective, our upbringings. All these things determine how we view things, right?
That's correct.
So again, because I've met some females who like do nothing but smoke cigarettes and like talk like, yo, son, and but some dudes find that attractive. Me, on the other hand, I'm like, yo,
No,
that's disgusting. So it's
it's kind of
based on people's perspective. So when we trying to understand what toxic masculinity is, it means something. It means different things to different people. The same way if we flip it, and we talk about toxic femininity, it would mean something different to each male because each male likes something different. Like the other day, some dude I went to high school with was talking about how he loved hood chicks.
I was about
Now,
to say that. I meet a
and
lot of guys say
right,
that.
let me
They
all
want
right, let me finish what I'm saying. You cut me off. So what I'm saying is it depends on the person's perspective. Because just because it might not be your cup of tea, it might be what the other person is looking for. So it's kind of hard to define toxicity. Y'all know what I'm saying.
I'm going to disagree with that because, and I'll tell you why I disagree with that. When I think about toxic masculinity, I think about men who use their power, whether in size or in gender, to dominate, to terrorize, to hurt. And I could be wrong, but that's what I'm seeing.
That's what I was gonna say too, Carmen, is that's why we can't call it racist when people who don't have the power of whatever race in that country has the most status. I lost my train of thought. I think you know what I was trying to say.
So as I'm looking at this list, right? If a person's suppressing their emotion, that like, is that really toxic? If you don't want to express yourself, is that really toxic?
No, it makes you the victim of toxic masculinity.
How? And then
Because
looking
you're
at this, trying to appear tough. Trying to appear tough is not toxic. What it is a defense mechanism.
Exactly. But what are you
But
defending
if you're
yourself against?
if you're scaring the people in the room with you, that's toxic, sir.
Is it really? Because listen, I work at a juvenile detention center. People, based on their environments, have to adapt because they know that they might be prey, right? So them acting tough isn't really toxic. They're just trying to adapt to an environment where they're now in a hostile environment. So is it really a thing about being toxic, or is it using survival skills? Because
No,
even
the thing is,
because
it's
even as
like
being
there
even
is-
as being a teacher in a regular setting, it's like once you put certain people in a certain classroom, it's like I now have to be on guard because I'm in an environment and I'm not comfortable with this situation. And because I'm not comfortable in this situation, I have to do certain things. That's not really being toxic. That's now this idea of survival of the fittest or self-preservation. And to be
no,
self.
it is
and
toxic.
to-
So
say-
here's the thing, Eric, there's a difference between protecting yourself and appearing tough like a peacock, right? Usually peacocks open their wings to make themselves look bigger and to make themselves look more beautiful. However,
exactly. So why would a peacock do that? It's about protecting oneself because they feel
so
threatened.
it depends on the environment. Now, if you take that behavior at home, you are no longer trying to survive. What you're doing is victimizing. So I think the setting has a lot to do with it, right? Where
But
you are in
he
the
has a
moment.
great point. These institutions do really push the poles of what it means to be male and female. Prison, fraternities, that's where people get toughened up and then they come back to their communities and everyone else has to toughen up to deal with them. But I think we have to remember that toxic masculinity is a transcendental thing. No one can be a toxic male, just like no one can be good or evil. These are forces that are bigger than us. Sometimes I act like a toxic male. Sometimes I act good. Sometimes I act evil. But it doesn't come down to the individual. You know, that person was put in a hard situation, and toxic masculinity is how they coped with it. So they're not the
again,
bad person.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but again, and it gets back to what Maurice talked about, is that he grew up in a certain environment. So he had to develop coping mechanisms or defense mechanisms in order for him to survive that environment. And once he was out of that environment, he's seen that, I don't have to be this way anymore. I'm not in self-preservation mode. So getting back to that list that you just showed, a lot of those are coping mechanisms. So is it really toxic? Because you're put in a situation where you now have to defend for yourself and you have to do certain things in order to protect yourself. So is it really toxic?
No, you're not toxic. You're just falling victim to this huge toxic institution that's telling you this is what you need to do.
No, and this goes beyond, institutions. It also, because your home can also be an institution, because it also molds and shapes how you view things, how you interpret information. So my thing is, anything where you spend enough amount of time can be an institution because it builds your psychological profile, right? So getting back to what I said earlier is that being toxic is not objective, it's subjective. Because just because you see a behavior and you don't agree with that behavior, it don't necessarily mean that it's toxic. Maybe
Well,
that
toxic means unhealthy, not that you
I
don't
don't
agree with
agree
it.
with that, Eric, because let me ask you something. It's subjective. If a man goes home and he beats his wife, that's subjective.
So what I'm saying is you're just focusing on like a violent act. I'm focusing on the totality of the list, right? So if you look at the totality of the list, if a person doesn't want to express themselves, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're toxic, because you have some people who are introverts, you have some people who are outroverts. I think that's the other way, or extrovert, I don't know, whatever. So some people manage their emotions in certain ways. It doesn't mean that they're suppressing it. It could be like you don't need to react to every situation. So it could be what India is saying is that you're managing your emotions by creating these compartmentalizing your emotions, because everything don't need a reaction.
And
I think you answered the question of the night.
And so it's foreign to you that people would use different types of emotions as the way of abuse.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Foreign concept.
I'm sorry, ask your question again.
I said, so it's a foreign concept to you that people can use emotions as a form of abuse.
I didn't say that. What I'm saying is everybody.
What he's saying is that men
It depends. It
The
depends
mental
on the
benefit,
it depends on the situation. It depends on the individual. Because I know some guys. I know some guys, especially growing up, where if you look at them wrong, they lose their minds and they ready to fight. Other people who you look at, they'll just look at you back, or they won't even be paying attention to you to know that you're looking at them. It all depends on the individual. It depends on where they're at in their life. Again, their upbringing. So again, some of the things that's on this list, some of them aren't toxic. People are people. Some people are more expressive. Some people are not.
that's what I was saying, is that people are people. You can't call them good or bad, toxic or not. We all are all things at sometimes, you know?
Exactly.
So
And I'm sorry, Ben, but people are asking, can they speak? Y'all can speak.
Yeah, I'm so yoga. I'd like to hear what she has to say. Let's hear from the.
The last subject was, the last thing was emotional, what? Emotional expression can be toxic. Was that it, Carmen?
Yes, I'm asking
abuse.
that sometimes toxicity don't have to be physical, right? It can be emotional as well. So I'm asking, is it possible that we can use emotion as a way of overpowering the people that needs it from us, right? So for instance, I could just not talk to my husband because I know that's a way of needling him, right? I'm overpowering him by just being completely quiet and not speaking to him for days. So am I not being toxic? I'm just using emotional toxicity. But I'm asking, is that possible?
Yeah, so that's what I agree with. That's why I was asking you specifically. I agree that it's toxic to limit your emotional expression. Especially in a situation where you being expressive is going to be helpful to the situation to find a solution. So it is toxic to withhold your emotions, or at least not communicate on, right now I don't have a response for you. Let me meditate, let me gather, and then, I'll have a response for you soon. So I agree with you, Carmen, that lack of emotional expression is toxic, because it's almost like there's an unnecessary tension. I know that my human mind likes to create stories on like something that may not be happening. Two people can be silent in a room, and I could have seen like an eye roll that could have been like a fly running into someone's eye, and that whole conversation that happens in my head is gonna develop then a story on how I'm seeing the person next to me, versus them saying, "Oh, a fly fell into my eye," and all of a sudden there's like emotional expression on what just happened, and now there's a communication between the beings, between people.
And on that note, how many families and relationships have broken up because of that inability to communicate?
So I have a question for I Am Yoga. Why do you make it the other person's responsibility to
I was just about to ask that.
prove the narrative that you run in your mind? Where is your accountability for that?
Hi, India. My name is Leslie, and I know that you think like Eric. So my accountability is where I just feel like there's a communication. So for me personally, I meditate on my own thoughts. I know that my thoughts can sometimes like drag out like a whole scenario that's unreal. So then I have to be mindful in the moment to trickle down those conversations or those like images that my mind is creating. So as far as accountability, for me personally, is there because I am trying to communicate with self on like, okay, don't put yourself in this like crazy mindset, because then my expression is going to be different, versus like, okay, my accountability will come into like, let's break the ice and hi, how are you? And I start a conversation with like, but I was speaking in general from like, I guess, scenarios that I've seen, or like when I do break the ice with people, the conversation turns into, oh my God, I thought you were this way, or even like vice versa. Yeah.
Right, but But I feel like that's an inherent thing with anybody, though. We're all going to have our own preconceived notions of somebody. It's until you get to know them that you start to break down who they really are. But I'm not going to put the onus on the other person for them to then turn around and, I guess, debunk whatever thoughts that I had in my head.
Well, I
I
was speaking on emotional expression. So like, if you decide not to be part of the interaction, then that's fine. I mean,
right, but you said that that's to like a toxicity, right? Because without the communication, then it's this undue tension.
I think, India, that we're capable of using our emotions to do harm, just like we could use sex to do harm.
Yes, true.
A man could use sex, or a woman, to abuse and to make their relationship become toxic.
And because of toxic masculinity, they might not even know they're doing it.
Correct.
We're repressing all this stuff.
Correct.
And men don't really have emotional intelligence to even realize that they're gaslighting their wife or something like that.
Correct.
So I have a question, because Carmen, you made a statement about you purposely not wanting to talk to your husband, and then because then that creates a situation. So in that case, if you consciously make a decision to do something, that's when the I can't speak right now. That's where the toxicity, that's where that comes from. So if you do something,
but you were saying, saying that that's not possible. You're saying suppressing your emotion is not possible. It's not possible.
Listen,
and I'm giving you a scenario about how it is possible.
In that situation, you're not suppressing your emotion. What you're doing is you're being spiteful, because you have it in your mind, I'm going to do something to purposely get on someone's nerve.
I'm dominating.
Listen.
I'm dominating.
You talking and you're not listening. You talking and you're not listening. What I'm saying to you is, if you premeditate you doing something, that's toxic. And you know that's going to get on somebody's nerve. That's toxic compared to you. No, listen, you're not, you see, you listening. You're not listening. You talking, you're not listening. So
I want, before you go further,
listen. You're just talking, you're not listening.
Go ahead.
If someone says something to you in the midst of not even an argument, just a conversation, right? And you don't react from that person, right? Because like Leslie said, you might want to think it over about how you want to react, because maybe you need clarification on what that person is saying. So instead of like overreacting, you might just, tone it down and take a laid back approach by saying, can I get back to you later, or something? That's not a thing about suppressing your emotion. That's the thing about you wanting more clarification before you react to a situation, compared to a spouse saying, listen, I know this gets on my spouse's nerves, so I'm going to do this intentionally. That's a totally different scenario. It's not the same thing.
Here's what the discussion was. You said that it's not possible. Suppressing your feelings is not possible. It's not toxicity. And I said it can be, depending on how you use it. If you're using your emotions to overpower someone, that's what being in a toxic relationship is. In whatever form, whatever tool you use to overpower someone, then you have created a toxic environment. That's all I said. And I gave you an example of what that looks like if I decided to use that. Does that make sense?
Oh, I'm hearing you. I understand what you're saying. I never said that suppressing your thing is like not a bad thing. What I'm saying is, some people are introverts, some people are extroverts. Some people, before they react to situations, they want to think it out before they react. So that's not a thing about suppressing your emotion, because some people, depending on who you speak to, they think that because you don't react, that means you're suppressing your emotion. And that might not be the case all the time, because some people who I know, before they go off the hinges and do whatever, they sit back and they compartmentalize what the information that's being said. They break it down, and then they say something in order to either de-escalate the situation or escalate the situation, because some people like to be dicks. So if you're a dick, you're gonna escalate the situation because like, oh, okay, I feel as though that you're being spiteful or whatever. So now I'm gonna take it there. Some people, they look at the situation like, oh, I don't think it's that much of a situation, so I don't really need to respond to the situation. So suppressing, and it's not even a thing about suppressing, it's about action, reaction. And sometimes everything don't need a reaction.
So before we go, can we agree on something? That toxic masculinity is not the same as gender roles. And toxic relationship means that there's an unequal balance of power in whatever form, an unequal balance of power and an unequal exertion of that power in whatever form.
Any final words, Ben?
That sounds about right. Like, we know that men are on average born bigger, and the most simple thing and the most primitive thing we could do is try to take advantage of that, you know. But that's basically what the history of gender roles, or the interaction between the two and historical genders, has been. Anyone else?
Yeah, see, that's the male role. With one part of that is control. So the male toxicity. I think it's a couple of years ago, maybe 2019, the Saudi women were allowed to drive. That was a male. That's part of the control. That's the toxicity of that maleness. Some of the things that women go through with the male is being approached, making them feel uncomfortable. They gotta watch what they wear. They gotta go out in groups. Why? Because of one male could be 3 females out at a nice event. Women have to be aware of being controlled, male coming at them, making them feel uncomfortable. Unhealthy expression of the male masculinity, toxic, not good.
Correct.
Toxic means unhealthy. So
yes, please.
That's what we need to remember, is that it's not about a moral decision or anything. It's just, whatever the power dynamic is, if one of the people in the relationship is not doing well, it's become toxic, whatever you want to call it.
Correct.
Yes.
Exactly.
The word. That's the word.
Absolutely.
So thank you guys. What do we do to change it? We start back with
Keep
our
doing
voice.
what we're doing right now. We
Yes.
educate.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Thank
try
you,
to make guys feel safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Beverly,
Ooh,
stay
this was
on
great.
so we could save
This
the link.
was great. This was great. This was great. Thank you, everyone who attended. Please don't forget to put your email address in the chat so I can send you a copy of my free ebook on intimacy and self-pleasuring.
Oh, right.
Okay. Ben, I really want to thank you for taking your time to do this. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was awesome to everyone to be able to really express themselves honestly. And I think we all got a lot out of it.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you much.
Beverly.
Without you guys, there's no us. So hopefully we could continue to do things like that, to educate, enlighten. We all may not agree, but at least we could listen to each other.
And we do it in a respectful way, yeah?
Absolutely.
Correct.
We
It's
accept
always
grace.
energetic. I think you'll get a good following.
Yes. Thank you, Grace.
Have a good one.
Okay.
Everybody have a good night.
Take care.
Okay, thank
everybody.
you.
Until.
Bev, stay so you can keep the transcript. Good night, guys.